talking to us about 360 and 150, consumers guiding us back to our roots. Please welcome Jim Kirkwood. There you are.
Morning. Do you have the, oh, there's a clicker. Thank you. Well, welcome. I am really enjoying this, my very first Lux conference. I had a great opportunity this morning to get up early and go out and run down the waterway outside here and just enjoy a wonderful time. Now, I'm not like Chris. I'm not very fast. The people that I pass are generally the people that are going the other way. And I learned in this town, which is truly a running town, I actually have trouble doing that. So anyway, again, I'm very excited to share with you this morning. And I had a great opportunity last night to really experience what I think the Lux Conference is all about. I, at the reception, met a tremendous number of people and had a great opportunity to connect on things that were very diverse, especially around technology. Now, I am a technology person, a geek at heart. And as Dennis said, I've been in a number of different positions within the organization, but it's when it comes to technologies when I get really excited. But today, I'm going to talk a little bit about technology, but I'm going to set aside my geekiness a little bit, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what is really, really important in the shifting of the feet, the shifting of the ground under our feet, which is to truly have a point north. And the point north for General Mills is connecting deep consumer insights to advantage technology. And that is what drives innovation, even when the grounds are shifting beneath us. So, for 150 years, the last 150 years, General Mills has been making food that consumers love. And this has really turned into a legacy, a heritage of brand building and of innovation. And in a morphing process that has occurred all the way back from the very beginning, when we were basically an industrial company, moving into when convenience became big. Betty Crocker was formed. Betty Crocker was a way to make cake mixes easy for people to use. And convenience continued, and things changed. Ready-to-eat cereals became a big deal. Wheaties, many of you I'm sure have heard of Wheaties. And we invented a cereal called Cheery Oats, which was actually the predecessor to Cheerios, which many of you probably know about. But then the world changed again, and we became a taste company. We looked at the yogurt business and recognized if we could partner with Yoplait and bring great tasting yogurt to the US market, we could grow that business dramatically. And then we realized the world was changing again, and we needed to go global. And so we purchased the rights to Yoplait around the world and made that into a global business. We also acquired Pillsbury, and Pillsbury brought in a huge international and global effort to us through baked goods around the world. And now the world is morphing again. And it's morphing to natural and organic and very unique brands that maybe you've never heard of. Things like Food Should Taste Good that we recently acquired, and Annie's and Immaculate Baking. And it's not happening just in the US, it's happening around the world. We just recently purchased a company called Yoki in Brazil, which is basically the General Mills of Brazil, which is again driving to drive growth in that area of the company, or of the country, of the world. All of this that General Mills has done is really focused on a core set of beliefs. And these core set of beliefs have not changed over the period of this time. Lots of things have changed, but not our beliefs. First of all, we believe that food should make us better as people. Secondly, we believe that food should bring people joy. That's unusual for a company to have in their mission joy. And third, we believe that food nourishes lives. And this is a lot bigger than just the nourishment we get from food, but nourishing lives in the way of bringing joy and connection to people. And that's the next thing, is connecting us to the people we love. When you eat dinner, you're sitting with people you love, and there is something that happens there, and it's around food. Every culture in the world has traditions around food. And finally, connecting us back to our roots, back to the earth. As a result of this, General Mills has become one of the largest food companies in the world. We market products in more than 100 countries, across 6 continents, and we employ more than 42,000 people across the world, of which half are in the United States, and the other half are spread throughout the rest of the world. And this year, we sold across all of our markets around $17.6 billion in sales. And that doesn't even include our joint ventures, which we have a significant presence there as well. Well, today, I want to take some time, and I want to take you on a full circle journey of what has happened in the food industry for General Mills, starting with our roots back in the very core of the industrialization of flour. And I want to focus on, as I said in the beginning, I want to focus on how important in driving innovation it is to understand the deepest consumer insight, the motivations of what your customers or our consumers are viewing the world as, and then connecting that to advantage technologies. And doing that in conjunction is what truly drives innovation. Now we're going to start again, as I said, with a vision and a consumer insight that our founder had in the flour world. And then we're going to fast forward to the year 2000, where companies like General Mills and others were focused on how do I deliver health benefits to my consumers. And we're going to show how they first failed and then succeeded in delivering functional foods. But functional foods didn't work, they had to be familiar. And then we're going to fast forward to today. And then the world today is shifting dramatically as we look at what's happening in the food industry. As people are looking for trust, they're looking for simplicity in their brands. It's dramatically changing the strategy that General Mills has to use to be able to innovate in this new world. The tools of the past don't work anymore. So I'm going to take you through that journey. We're going to begin, of course, in 1866, when our company really started. The 1860s, it was an incredible time. We were growing rapidly, expanding westward. It was a time of great excitement, but also a time of great division. The Civil War was tearing apart the United States, but it was also a time of great technical revolution. What was happening is the unprecedented application of mechanization was creating an industry, what some people called a second industrial revolution. Oops, there we go. I'm having trouble with this clicker here. And what happened in the United States was amazing. It was a major transformation. We talk about the earth shifting. We were moving from an agrarian society, an economy that was based on agriculture, to urban centers. And the railroad was a key driver of this. What's pictured here is actually the completion of the Transcontinental Railway. And that railroad allowed the transportation of goods, services, and food and people from one part of the country to the other, and enabled tremendous growth. And that growth allowed us to be able to look at our company, how we could deliver convenient foods, convenient services to be able to support the growth in the market. Now, Minneapolis was no exception. And what's pictured here is the St. Anthony Falls in Minneapolis, which is where industrialization was taking place. And our founder, a person by the name of Cadwalader Washburn, after the Civil War, came up the river and saw these tremendous falls. And he saw them as power to power industry. And he had a vision, a big vision. And his vision was that he wanted to harvest the grain that was growing in the plains and be able to convert that into flour to feed this growing nation. And he made that vision happen. He built an amazing factory called Washburn's Bee Mill. It was huge. It stood 6 stories above the Mississippi River. And his contemporaries at that time were, "You're crazy. There's no way you're going to fill the capacity of this plant. You're going to go bankrupt." And they called it Washburn's Folly. But Mr. Washburn had a consumer insight, a deep consumer insight that none of his contemporaries had. And he acted on that. What he saw was on a trip to Europe. He had the opportunity to experience the pastries, the white bread, the cakes that royalty were eating in Europe. And he recognized that it was out of this world. He loved them. And he said, "How are you doing that?" And he found out that what they were using was something called snowy white flour. It was produced on a very small scale. Only royalty, only the very richest people could afford to have that. Everybody else, the rest of the masses, had this brown flour. It was ground from basically spring wheat, and after a very short period of time, it became rancid and tasted horrible. And he recognized that if he could bring back that snowy white wheat, and he could make that happen in the United States, he could transform and disrupt the entire industry. And that's exactly what he did. But now that he had the consumer insight is only so good. He's got to figure out how he can do that on an economic scale. And Mr. Washburn was the first, at least in our company, to exercise connected innovation. He developed, with the help of others, the Middlings purifier. And this Middlings purifier was actually not developed by him. He had a miller, a very unschooled man from Alabama who was brilliant and also was a fantastic collaborator. And what he did was he connected with a company, an inventor, that created milling equipment. And he took existing milling equipment and transformed it into something that could deliver this snowy white flour. And his vision, Mr. Washburn's vision, came to fruition. He filled that plant. And he not only filled that plant, he was able to charge between $3 and $5 more per barrel for that flour than his contemporaries. And the volume, the value, and the margin is what powered the beginning of the General Mills Company. And that connection, that insight connection to technology, has been something that has been replicated over and over again over the 150 years. In the next 50 seconds, I'm going to show you a montage of where this has happened, not only on the technology and food side, but also on the communication technology side, on the consumer advertising side. Let's watch. You can see that from our roots, from that first insight, there has been tremendous growth. I don't know if you happen to notice, change happens. There's been 10 Betty Crockers. And she has changed from the beginning of the 50s until where she is today to keep up with what people really perceive as what Betty Crocker should be. Well, now let's fast forward to the 2000s. The internet has emerged and is now in the hands of mainstream consumers. They now are able to take control of their life, take control of their health. They're now seeing that they can do unique things to be able to prevent disease, and they are learning. And in this section, I'm going to talk a little bit about how companies like General Mills and companies like our competitors really took a look at this and decided that, hey, maybe we can do something about it. But they realized that they were going to potentially fail because they didn't truly understand the insight. We completely missed the insight. And I'm going to talk about how that happened. When the internet came and consumers were able to understand, they saw things like omega-3 fatty acids, and they realized, hey, I can do something about my cognition. They saw calcium, and they read information about how if I have high calcium, I can have strong bones and maybe not have osteoporosis. They saw things that were emerging in the fiber world, where if I eat the right set of fibers, I might be able to control my heart, I might actually be able to extend my life, I might be able to reduce my cholesterol. All of this information was available and out there for consumers. And food companies at the same time heard consumers talking about that, and we said, aha, this is opportunity. Food is an excellent delivery mechanism to be able to bring these benefits to consumers. And so, as food companies, we began to expand our technology. We hired nutritionists. We hired epidemiologists. We created health and nutrition areas. And we started to create evidence to prove that what was on the internet could actually work in our products. And soon, claims were being made. You saw packages across the country and actually across the world that had clinically proven to do X, clinically proven to do Y. And in some cases, companies invented entire brands around this. What you see on the screen here is what Kellogg's approach was to this. They created a brand called Ensemble. Does anybody remember Ensemble? I didn't think so. But Ensemble was a wonderful concept. It was using a very unique fiber called psyllium that was clinically proven and was very effective in reducing cholesterol without drugs. It was an exciting product. And they had the concept of saying, we want to build this out across all opportunities that consumers have to eat food, from breakfast cereals to frozen entrees for dinner, for snacks. They built a huge set of offerings. But this psyllium thing was a little concerning because it wasn't necessarily intuitive. People didn't truly understand what even psyllium was. The ready-to-eat market, the ready-to-eat cereal market, was no different. And this is where General Mills jumped in. We created a cereal that was clinically designed, called Harmony, clinically designed to be able to meet the needs of women. And we had high levels of folic acid were added, calcium and iron that was going to build bone strength, and again, help us with osteoporosis concerns. It also had soy protein isolate added to it that was the perfect amino acid profile for women. Exciting. But again, not necessarily intuitive. Our total business jumped in. How many of you remember the Atkins craze? You remember the Atkins craze? Yeah. The Atkins craze was, oh my gosh, if I eat protein and I really minimize my carbohydrates, I can manage my weight. And so we jumped on that. We took cereal and we added 13 grams of protein through things like whey protein isolate and other very strange sounding ingredients. And there was a little bit of an intuitive problem there too. I thought cereal was really carbohydrates. How are you getting to these super high levels of protein? I thought that was meat. I thought that was dairy. And speaking of dairy, Horizon, a company that makes milk, was adding DHA, omega-3 oils to their milk to try and drive a cognitive benefit. When was the last time you saw a cow that produced fish oil? Not real intuitive. So what was the result of all this? Well, the result of all this was that companies like us had understood the information, but had not turned that into a deep insight. We'd understood from what we read and what we were learning from consumers that they wanted to prevent disease by using food as a mechanism to do that. But we didn't understand the why. And the why was because they hated the cure. They hated the idea of being in the medical system and having to use drugs and these strange chemicals. What they really wanted was they wanted the ability to be able to manage their health through things they could understand and food they could understand. We in the industry missed that, and we paid a very dear price for that. We developed a ton of technologies that were very efficacious, that literally could improve public health. But because the consumer rejected it, it didn't matter. It just plain didn't matter. People weren't going to eat it. And so General Mills learned, and we learned the hard way, but we learned in an interesting way. It was kind of a juxtaposition of two different products. We had done a lot of work during this period of time to understand how cholesterol could be managed through food. And we had done the work on beta-glucan, which is a subcomponent of whole grain oats. And we had demonstrated that clinically we could reduce cholesterol. At the same time, another company, Benecol, had demonstrated that through adding plant stanols to margarine, they could have the same kind of benefit. And these two things were launched. And interestingly, consumers struggled a little bit because they couldn't understand with Benecol, by eating more fat, I'm going to reduce my cholesterol? Bit of an intuitive problem. But we saw with Cheerios a tremendous success. And finally, it got through our dense heads. The aha was, it is about inherent health, not addition of ingredients to food to deliver health. And that was the key insight. That insight guided us to a project. And the project was a pretty aggressive project. We called it Project Washburn in deference to our founder. And that was, how could we take all of our cereals and completely convert them to whole grain? Now, many of our cereals were whole grain, but most of our cereals were made with refined grain. And so this was a huge, gnarly problem. But we had the insight. And remember, if you have the consumer insight right, you just need to find the advantage technology, and then you will win in the marketplace. We'd seen that over and over again, and here was our opportunity. Now, as we looked at this big, gnarly problem, there were three major issues that we encountered. The first one was manufacturability. When we tried to make products out of whole grain was much more fluffy as a raw material. And so as we fed it to our cookers, as we fed it to our processing equipment, the rates were cut in half. And that's really not acceptable from an economic standpoint. We couldn't do that. The second area was flavor. Especially in children's cereals, when we combined whole grains with some of the ingredients we use, we got some terrible tasting stuff. Not exactly the joy that we're trying to bring to people's lives. And finally, it was shelf stability. We generally want to have the ability to ship our cereals around the country, so we need at least 9 months to 12 months of shelf life. And after a very short period of time, this stuff tasted like garbage. So besides that, we had it kicked. This was basically everything that was related to cereals. And so we decided this was how we were going to apply that advantage technology. We took proprietary technologies to be able to figure out how to suck the air, literally suck the air out of the product that was coming in to be able to increase our rates. And we saw that the product, like Chex Mix, completely disintegrated. But we used unique extrusion and technology and cooking technology to be able to overcome that, again, in a proprietary advantaged way. In the flavor side of things, we recognized that when cocoa was cooked alongside of whole grain corn, there were some really terrible things that happened. So we created a unique technology, again, proprietary, to be able to separate those two until the very end, and then bring them together at the very end, and we eliminate those reactions from occurring. And then we were very proud of what we did on a shelf stability standpoint. Going back to Washburn, connected innovation. We came alongside a supplier came alongside us, and we connected to have them pre-treat the whole grains that were coming into our system so that the components that were delivering this off flavor could be eliminated. We understood the mechanism, and were able to eliminate them. And we were able to defeat the shelf stability issue. This, for us, was a huge accomplishment. And we were able to launch this product. We were able to connect that deep consumer insight of that I want to know that the health that I'm getting is from natural inherent things to unique technology, to advantage technology that let us win in the marketplace. And we launched the product. I'm going to show you the ad that we launched this product with. So let's watch.
9 out of 10. That's 90% of the population.
Yeah, I'm the main.
Time to discover that whole grain may help manage weight
Help me manage my weight. I need that.
and is good for the heart.
My heart could use some help.
Welcome to the first day of your whole grain life. Now every General Mills cereal is made with whole grain.
Honey Nut Cheerios.
Lucky Charms.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Makes you feel good that she's eating it.
Whole grain, G, General Mills. Easy.
Guaranteed from General Mills. Welcome to the first day of your whole grain life.
We were very proud of this launch. But even more proud were what we did for public health in the country. And this quote here from the former commissioner of the FDA really kind of summarized it. He said meaning our launch of whole grain, could signal the most comprehensive improvement in the nation's food supply since the government began mandatory fortification of grains in the 1940s. Those rules helped eradicate many dietary diseases. So we felt really validated that we had delivered a consumer insight and had significantly bettered the life of our consumers. So now let's move to now. There is a lot of change happening. The world is changing so dramatically in the food industry, and we're going to have to morph. There's lots of little brands out there with funky names and funky ingredients, some of them with funky safety, that are being sold across the world. And they are pulling from our categories, pulling from our brands. And all of our businesses, our big businesses, were starting to go into decline. And we didn't understand why. So what we did, recognizing what we learned during the days of our failure in the health area, we realized that we needed a very, very disciplined way to go after understanding those deep, deep insights of consumer insights. So we invented a process that we called I3, immersion, interaction, and idea creation. And this process was based on anthropological techniques, ethnographies, where we spent days in people's homes. We sat with them, we ate with them, we would go to the shop with them, we'd go to the grocery store, we'd come home with them, we'd deal with their kids. And the idea was to immerse, to understand what those problems were, and then to interact and experience the same problems they had. We learned a ton out of that. And we learned a lot of the preconceptions that we had were completely blown out of the water. And only then, only after we had done that, would we go to ideation creation. And the interesting thing here is the real value is getting the people who have the problem close to the people who can solve it. And that's the technical people. That's the geeks. The geeks were the ones that were sitting across the table from the children and the people in these sessions. Extremely valuable. And out of that, we discovered what the insight was that was causing our problem. Let's have a look.
More and more moms are seeking real food for their families. They are more aware of what goes into their food, how it's made, and how it can impact our health. But it's not just the moms. Today's kids are also much more sophisticated when it comes to food knowledge.
She never buys any of the cereals and stuff that has like fake stuff in it, and because sometimes I'll point something out and then she says, "Tell me if you can read all the ingredients in there." It says they're whole grain, but they have marshmallows. And the marshmallows are colored. They have food coloring in them, and food coloring has probably has fake stuff in it.
We are getting to an age now where everything is so overprocessed. There's GMOs in our food. There's chemicals in our food that cause cancers that are basically like, you know, they're plastic. And when you think about all the stuff, the ingredients that they're putting in, it would be just so nice to be able to find foods that just have limited ingredients that just taste good.
So what's the insight here? The insight was that if I can't spell it, I'm not going to eat it, regardless of whether it's safe. The science was true. I mean, everything we do is safe. We've proven it's safe, but it doesn't matter anymore. These are some additional quotes, and in the purpose of time, I'm not going to go through them. But the key insight was, I don't want to take a risk. I want to go back to what my previous generations ate because I understand that that was good. So, how do we respond to that? Well, you probably saw recently an announcement that we made that just like we did in the whole grain world, we're going to take our cereals and completely eliminate all artificial colors, all artificial flavors, and all preservatives. Now, that doesn't sound that big of a deal. Well, the bottom line is that's the entire toolbox that General Mills has used for the last 50 years from a technical standpoint to make foods look good, taste good, and last. So what the heck are we going to do? Well, we realized that we were going to have to create a new toolbox. We realized that the insight, which was really about this natural, I want foods that are in my pantry. If it's not in my pantry, then I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to eat your food. We had to figure out how we were going to do that and eliminate the mismatch technology was this toolbox that we had used for years and years and years. So what are we going to do about it? Well, what we saw and what we are seeing, and we are in the throes of a major, major change within the food industry, is to move from the old tools, which are additives, chemicals, to the new tools, which are leveraging biological and life sciences to be able to make those changes in a very, very natural way. And of course, as always, the consumers were way ahead of us. They already believed in fermented foods. They already believed in bioprocesses. Artisan bread, fantastic and growing area. Craft beers and wine, again, which fermented foods are fantastic. There's a whole load of new products that are, I said weird brands and weird products. They're in the vegetable area where people are pickling and using pickling as a way of driving new products. In the dairy and in the meat, they love blue cheese. And it's all microorganisms. They love the idea of what's happening in there. And in meat, the flavors and textures that we love all come from the microorganisms that are on those products. The old has become new again, and the new has become old. We've gone full cycle. But there's a common theme across all of this, and the common theme is this whole area of bioprocessing. If we look at bread, it's yeast, and the yeast is in there, and it's lactobacilli, like in a sourdough bread, that brings the unique flavors and can drive the future. Beer and wine, it's interesting. We saw a craft beer that they use yeast, of course, to ferment it, but the feedstocks are very different. This one craft beer was using donuts. They were throwing donuts into the mix and fermenting those donuts and creating a really neat, unique tasting craft beer. And vegetables, like I said, that sour taste, driving a whole line of new products. And in dairy and meat, textures and very unique flavors, all driven by bioprocessing. So what can we do with bioprocessing? Can we solve our problems in that area? And this is where there's a real opportunity to continue our connected innovation approach. Here's some, how many people have heard of sprouted grain? Well, sprouted grain is a bioprocess. Those grains begin to grow, things begin to break down, phytochemicals that are potentially great for your health begin to appear, and if we process food from that, we now can drive wellness. On the clean label piece, very interesting things going on. Many of you probably have heard about nitrates in meat and how people are really concerned about nitrates. Well, we found that if we can culture celery, we can eliminate nitrates, and celery can do the same thing that nitrates can. Very interesting. Celery is a much better thing on the label than nitrates, cultured celery. And this is a really interesting one. There was a brand new patent that's just released from a juice company where they reduced the sugar on juice by simply fermenting it with yeast, having the yeast consume the sugar and then extract the alcohol, and now you have a sugar-free juice. Interesting concept. All done through bioprocessing, not through chemicals. So what else can happen? In General Mills, we are moving to a big, big new area. Like I said, the ground is shifting to Chris's. It's shifting beneath us, and we've been working very hard to figure out how we're going to deal with that. We're moving into the natural and organic area, and this requires even more of an emphasis on being able to deliver simplicity, but in a way that's safe, using technology. So how else are we going to do this? What else can biology do, and what can biology do that chemistry had done in the past? And I throw this out to the group here. This is a very diverse group. We are looking for solutions, and we are open to solutions. In preservation, yogurt works for a short period of time. If you culture yogurt, you get some stability out of milk. But we need other forms of stability. And flavor and color. What about extracts? Are there extracts of interesting fruits and vegetables that are available? Or what about microorganisms that could potentially generate pigments as they culture? These are the kind of ideas we need. And texture. What enzymes, what types of bioprocesses can we use to build that mouthfeel in the cake that everybody loves? And then in the health arena, everybody knows, at least on the, not necessarily science, but in the consumer world, that fermented foods are good for your gut. So what is really happening there, and can we leverage that? Food safety. Can we design microbes that will destroy microbes? Microbes that will eliminate pathogens? That's the kind of thing we need. Those are the kind of ideas that we need to be developing. And clearly this all culminates in new products. Pictured here is a company, or is a product called Ole Kraut. And basically it's a designer sauerkraut that's just taking off on the west coast of the US. And it's basically in a kale and smoke flavor. Kind of weird, but it's growing in a big way. So in summary in this area, what we believe is how we're going to deliver against this insight with very unique and advantaged technology is what we call in situ simplicity, which is taking and understanding all the way back to the genome of our raw materials, being able to build raw materials in a non-GMO way that deliver benefits, and then be able to bio-convert those using fermentation or enzyme enhancement to be able to deliver the things that we need to deliver. Simple foods, next generation bio or plant-based products, and naturally protected products. So, I've taken you full circle. We started out with industrialization. We moved to delivering health benefits in a functional food, but it had to be familiar. It was familiarization. And we've ended up coming full circle. The consumers have guided us all the way back. I want that food that my previous generations had. So hopefully you've seen that throughout this, The common theme, the thing that has made General Mills successful through this 150 years, is understanding that deep consumer insight and being able to connect that to an advantage technology, which then drives growth. Now, I'm going to leave you with a couple of provocative questions because many of you are not in the consumer goods. But that's okay. You have a customer. Your customer may not be the consumer, but you have a customer. What insights around that customer are driving your innovation? Do you understand the why? Have you gone deep with them? What does an ethnography look like in going into your customers? Secondly, are you innovating from information or from insights? Our failure that we had that I talked about was because we understood all the information, but we didn't go deep enough to understand the why. Third is, how are you getting the people that can solve the problem closest to the people that have the problem? And lastly, I challenge you to say, is your innovation or a technology effort looking for a problem to solve? Or do you have the problem in mind first and you're bringing that advantage technology to solve that problem? Really critical. In our business, we have seen that has been the driver of success. So, thanks. I think, do we take questions now? Is that? Yes, okay, great. Any questions from all of you? I know I've shared a bunch of stuff here, and probably for some of you it's new. Some of you probably have experienced it, but would love to take any questions if you have any.
Roger Grace Associates. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm a foodie from San Francisco.
Yes.
Born in Boston. Can you, since we're here with our dear friends from Lux, can you talk a little bit about the evolution of the market research that you did, and why did you, and with all due respect, why did you have these failures? I would have thought that if you did sufficient market research with those people that went to the homes and lived with those people and shop with those people, you could preempt those problems.
The answer to your question is yes, but we didn't do the ethnographic research at the beginning. We used traditional research techniques, which are questionnaires, where you send questionnaires out, you get data back. You sit on the other side of a mirror in a focus group, and you have a group of people in a non-home situation saying, this is what we do. We learned many of our failures were because we took that information and applied it. But that information was from consumers, but it was wrong. An example, I sat with a group of consumers on refrigerated dough. And the can, are you familiar with the can of refrigerated dough in baked goods? And we asked the consumers, what could we do that could make that better? Oh, absolutely nothing. It's the best package in the whole world. And then we did an ethnography. And we went into that same woman's home. She opened her refrigerator. The stuff rolled onto the floor. She puts it back in the refrigerator. And then she gets out the Grand's biscuits, and she hits it on the side of the cabinet. Boom! It makes a big explosion. And she says, I hate that. It makes me feel so stupid. That is the insight, not what she told us in the room. And that is where we learned that we have to go to these to really learn that kind of information. So the failures we had were because we didn't get deep enough to understand those whys. And the technical people didn't get deep enough. Sometimes the marketing people were off doing that and the CI people, but not the technical people that could solve the problem. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
I want to talk about how you started to integrate behavioral sciences into your teams. Did you hire a behavioral scientist to talk with your food scientists, or did you teach them how to recognize these insights? Because I think it's one thing you can put a chemist or a scientist in next to the end user, but he may or she may not have the skills to actually recognize what's going on.
That's a great question. We did hire an anthropologist and built this whole I3 process. We built something called the I Squad. And that I Squad was a small distributed team that moved back and forth between the technology teams, between the marketing teams, and worked through these massive ethnographic studies and brought people in from the technical community to be able to be a part of those studies. And they learned on the job, basically, with this anthropologist. We'd sit with them. I remember an amazing opportunity that I had to be able to sit with this anthropologist as he was in a woman's home. And she was a woman who had made less than $30,000 as a household. And I followed that woman with him asking just basic questions and learning how those questions were being asked as we went to the grocery store. And she pulled out a $20 bill and said, "This is what I'm going to spend for my family of 4 this week, because this is all I have." And we watched how she went through, and she successfully delivered that. She bought our Totino's pizzas. She bought our Totino's pizzas, they were 99 cents at that time. She had a buy one, get one free coupon, and the grocery store had a double the coupon. So she got 4 pizzas for 99 cents. Over and over again, she was able to do that. And I would have never known the questions to ask. And I'm just following this person around the grocery store. But I watched him, and I learned from him. Kevin Ryan's his name, an amazing person, and he helped us really understand that. And of course, he's a foodie. We're all foodies at General Mills. And so he's a chef as well, so he understands the whole piece of that and helped train us in that. Hope that answers your question. Okay, thank you.
You mentioned what most of the food company has, the traditional food science toolbox to more of a bioprocessing toolbox. The food science toolbox has been big enough that not only so General Mills, but the Kraft, the Mondelez, and Hershey, so many other food companies. Is the bioprocessing toolbox, as we know today, is it big enough to create a multitude of products that with not only which are natural, create a multitude of products that we see today, basically?
Well, the toolbox isn't developed yet. So I'd say the answer is it's not big enough today. And I think the winners in our industry are going to be those that can figure out how to do that in a very advantaged way. There are many plethora of places that we can go and that we can learn and we can try. Some of them will be successful, some of them won't. But again, as I looked at it, as I showed our history at the very beginning, it's about morphing. You have to morph you have to change with the times. And we know that what worked in the past is not going to work in the future. And so we are focusing on developing those new tools. It's not that the food science toolbox will go away entirely. I mean, I kind of, a little bit of hyperbole there, because in developing countries, different consumers, as they segment out, are in different places. But what we see is what we call the tip of the spear consumer. Those are the people that are setting the trends that will trickle down through the developed countries, will eventually trickle down through the developing countries. And those are the concepts, those are the truths that will flow from beginning to end. And so that's where we see we have to develop this now to be ready for that in the future.